Good morning or good afternoon, based upon where you're located. This is Stuart Blumenthal with ETHOSystems. Today, we're going to be having a really fun session on inventory optimization through barcoding with Sage Intacct. So some of you go, wow, that's really sounds like a lot of fun. And some of you go, wow, that doesn't. But to me, barcoding and inventory optimization is really fun and important, because most companies that do not optimize their inventory or do not really store it correctly and count it correctly lose tens of thousands of dollars each year. So with that, Stuart Blumenthal, Intacct Practice Director. We also have a special guest today, Steve Showalter from ScanForce, who's going to be going through the actual product and showing you how it all works. So just a couple logistics before we get started. The presentation is 30 minutes long. The phone lines are muted, so please use the questions feature. I'm going to be monitoring that throughout the whole session. If you have any questions, use that. And then last but not least, if you want a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, just put your name and email address into the questions feature, and I'll send you a copy of the presentation when it's done. One last slide before I turn it over to Steve is that we've got some upcoming webinars in our series. The first one is one on Salesforce integration. That's we are seeing more and more deals, especially in construction, having to deal with Salesforce as the CRM tool. And Sage Intacct has an amazing integration with Salesforce, so we're excited about that one next month. Also next month, we're going to be doing a training on the GCPay. For those in the construction industry, GCPay is a stable for those in the those who are general contractors, and we're going to be showing the release of the GCPay module for Sage Intacct. So we're really excited about that. And then in September, we're going to be doing a Smart Rules training for teaching you, our end users, how to do Smart Rules training setups and configuration within Sage Intacct. So if you have any questions about those, please feel free to sign up. You should have gotten emails on those. But if you didn't, please let me know. Be happy to send you the links. And these are going to be some great trainings that are coming up. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make Steve the presenter here. So right click, make presenter. And Steve, you should be able to be the presenter at this point and show your screen.
All right, and then let me do this, Stuart. I need to make sure that the PowerPoint shows up properly so I can continue on with what you were showing here. And while I'm pulling this up, I'll give kind of the quick overview of what it is that I'm going to be showing you guys all here today. I'm going to go over a little bit of background on ScanForce and the solution that we're going to present here. And then I will be showing you guys an actual demonstration of the solution so you can see what the mobile app side of this looks like, as well as how that's flowing back into Sage Intacct. All right, let's pull this up again. Let's try. Now is it showing the
Yes,
PowerPoint there?
Got it. You're fine.
All right, perfect. Thanks everybody for bearing with me there. So let's talk about what the solution is called first and foremost. So ScanForce entered into an agreement with Sage Intacct back in December to white label our solution. For those of you that are familiar with that, great. For those of you that aren't, at least that terminology, what that basically means is that Intacct recognized that it needed a barcode solution. It needed an intact barcode solution. And our solution had been out and proven, and customers were using it. And they liked it so much, and with the seamless integration, they wanted to call it now the Sage Intacct Inventory Automation. So it is an Intacct solution. It is an Intacct module, seamlessly integrated into the Intacct system. So we developed that. The way it was approached from the design standpoint and architecture is to be a true extension of the inventory features and functions or inventory module within Sage Intacct. There are two versions of this. There's what we refer to as the core version, and there's actually a construction specific installation. The only difference really between the two is that we're referencing jobs in two main places. Three if you kind of count it in terms of operations or transactions. One is on the inbound. If a job is referenced on a PO, that information simply displays for the user. So they can see that, hey, I'm receiving this in, maybe set these items aside for a particular job. The other two aspects of it would be issuing inventory to a job, specifying the job, cost code, cost type, and then obviously doing returns as well. So that's the additional components related to construction. Again, all seamlessly integrated with Intacct, all information related to inventory And in the construction instance, jobs is all maintained within Intacct. The user interface, which again, you'll see in a little bit here, is extremely versatile. You can customize this to look however you want it to look in terms of your workflows, what you call transactions, and ultimately what it does is it ties back into the workflows and transaction definitions that you set up in Intacct. So an example of that might be an inventory adjustment, but you might want to call it an issue on the mobile device. I'm issuing items out, but really it's an adjustment back in Intacct. And then you can go ahead and have multiple transactions like that set tied back to specific GL functions, things like that. It's also applicable across all verticals, all industries, all companies. I obviously don't have visibility at the moment of who's attending here in terms of what verticals or what industries you all might be in. But really, if you're interested in this, you obviously carry inventory. It doesn't matter what type of a company you are. If you're dealing with inventory, a barcode solution just makes sense. All right. So the applications that we typically deal with as it relates to inventory would be receiving, shipping. You can even do, if you have a multi-step shipping process, you can do a true pick, pack, and ship. So I might stage orders, and then I'm going to pack and ship them as a secondary transaction. We support inventory counts, so whether you're doing periodic cycle counts or you want to do a year-end inventory, that supports that as well. Transfers is another common one, and Intacct has released, I'm not sure how many people are using it at this moment, but they've released a transfer request program where you can actually go in and create a document to request items to be moved from one location to another. So an example, if you have a warehouse in California and one in New York, they can actually request information or items from each other, and there's an actual document. And then with the mobile device, when you go to do the transfer, it's going to validate those items to make sure the items that were requested to be transferred are in fact getting transferred. We've also gone out and developed what we refer to as AKA or advanced kit assemblies. So if you're dealing with kits, Intacct does handle kits, but we went a step further. And it allows for components of these kits. So the items that make up a kit to support lot and serial items. And also on the mobile side, allows you to either go with a back flushing method, which would be I'm making this item and I'm making this many of them. All components in appropriate quantities then get pulled out of inventory and the finished product gets placed in. The second option with that would be to actually have it prompt the user through each one of the components that makes up the kit and the appropriate quantities. Label printing is next on the list here. That does work with advanced kit assembly as well as inbound. So when you're receiving items in, if they don't have barcodes on them, right from the mobile device, you can trigger labels to print. The last part of label printing that comes into play is there is, and again, like the next item here, mobile ship. So there's a seamless integration directly into these carriers from the mobile app as you're picking and shipping an order. You need the labeling software because obviously that's what triggers it over to print out your shipping labels then. All right, a couple of highlights just for this. That, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's an Intacct module. So this is just something that you would buy like you'd buy any other aspect of Intacct. It's customizable from the layout on the screens, like I mentioned, to accommodating any other potential customizations that a company might need. We always say the solution is developed to be as out of the box as it possibly can be, but there's no two companies that are exactly alike. So if you need customizations, it's customizable. As you'll see in the demo here in a minute, it's extremely intuitive and user-friendly. The training on this solution from the actual mobile side of this is almost non-existent. You can hand pretty much anybody the application, and it's going to prompt them through what they need to do. And with the instant data validation, you can't make a mistake, really. The other part is that this doesn't require you to have an Intacct user license for every single one of the devices out there. Obviously, for any location you would have handling inventory, you're going to want to have an actual true Intacct user, be it just a warehouse user or whatnot. You're going to want to have that so you have the visibility into your true Intacct system. But from the mobile side of things, if you need 10 scanners out there, you do not need an additional 10 Intacct users. I'll talk for a second here about the drawback to that, actually. It's leveraging, the solution leverages web services from a user standpoint. So what happens is you do lose that visibility in Intacct as far as who did that receipt, right? However, as this last bullet mentions here, we do keep a detailed transaction history in what we refer to as our management portal. And I'll show you guys that. And it actually gives you the detail as far as who did the transaction, time and date stamps, what item, what operation, even what device the person was logged into. And that's also customizable. And then you can export and report off of that as well. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and get out of the PowerPoint here before I hand it back over to Stuart. And what you're looking at here is an emulation of the way the app would display on a mobile device. So in terms of devices, the app can be run on iOS or Android. So you can run it on smartphones if you want to, or tablets even. It even can run on a PC, well, like I'm doing now. The typical use is on devices that have a built-in scanner. And that's something we also help you guys out with. So there's a long list of devices out there. We have a recommended and endorsed scanner list that we would always provide to people. And again, walk you through what type of environment are these going to be used in, what style of barcodes are you scanning, things along those lines. Bottom line though is that it's versatile in terms of the hardware scanners, but the app looks the same. So what I'm going to show you today would be the same no matter what device you guys are going to use it on. Now I'm going to pull up my demo instance of Intacct here. So here's my demo instance, and let's start. For me, the solution makes the most sense to start on the receiving side of things. That's the inbound. There's really, I'll say, three components to inventory control. There is the bringing items in, there's the taking items out, and then there's what you do with the items, meaning count them, transfer them, and so on. So I'm going to go into purchasing here. And again, this is just generic transaction definitions. If you guys have Intacct, they may look a little different based on how you have it set up. If you don't, this is again customizable as well. You create your own workflows here. So I'm going to go into purchase order for inventory, and let's create a new one here. Again, this is the Intacct side of things. And I'm just going to grab a random vendor because it doesn't matter. And we're going to go down here, and here's where you would add items. So your creation of POs, it stays the same whether you're using barcoding or not. Whether you're doing it from a purchase requisition document over to a PO, or just going in and creating a PO, or you have an EDI solution, whatever you guys are using, the POs are created and then we take them from there. So let's go ahead and grab a couple of items here. All right, let's grab this entry system. I'm going to leave my quantity of 1 for that. Let's just grab a second item for demo sakes here. Let's grab some cameras and say we're going to do 10 of these. All right, I'm going to post this. PO is now in my Intacct system. I'm going to pull up that emulation of the app here, and I'm going to log in. So this is where and how we control what I mentioned a little bit ago as far as who does what on this within this app. These are the users you set up. There's no cost associated with these. The solution is licensed by device. You have 10 scanners, you need 10 device licenses, but I could have 30 different logins on this and it's not going to cost me any more. You also then can tie the login to permissions, so you can control who does what. So it allows us to see who does what and control who does what. It even can be password protected. So if you have people out in your operations that are sharing devices, that's great. You don't have to worry about them logging in with someone else's permissions, just password protected. And last on this main login screen here is it does support multiple entities. Now, if you're just using one, that's fine. Or if you have users that only work within a certain entity, we can tie that to that user login as well, so there's no option to select. If you have multiple and you want the users to select, there's just a drop down here. They can select whichever one they're working in. I'm going to tap accept. Here is that main menu that I mentioned as far as the way it's set up for me. I have transactions nested. So let's start with the transaction we first we're talking about here, receiving. I have that categorized under inbound. So when I tap on inbound, I have PO receiving, or what I term a direct receipt into inventory. It's simply just a inventory adjustment that is simply on the device here, just referred to as a direct receipt, commonly used in warehouse control. Now, you don't have to do this. You could simply have PO receiving on the main screen. Doesn't matter. It's just showing you the flexibility of this. I'm going to launch the transaction by tapping on it. And let me also comment, you're seeing me navigate with my pen here, or my pointer. You typically would be touching on the screen, just tapping on it with your finger and kind of moving along that way, be it on a smartphone again or an actual scanner. Now, the first thing it wants to know here is, well, what purchase order am I going to receive in? If you print it off a PO, we can use barcode fonts and get the PO number barcoded so you shoot the sheet of paper. Another common thing we see is asking your vendors to put a barcode of your PO number on the packing list. So when you get the shipment in, you pull that out, boom, it's right there scanned. You also can do a lookup, and what this does is it connects up real time, reading Intacct, and shows me, oh, here's that PO we just created. I guess in real life, you'd never create a PO and have it arrive instantly, so we're just gonna have to pretend here for a minute. But let's say now that has arrived, I'm gonna select that PO and hit accept. Now here's something cool this app does. It's grabbing the data from Intacct for that PO and it's indexing it locally on the device. Now that's important because this makes this mobile app truly mobile, meaning I don't have to be connected at all times. Now that I have the information for this purchase order on my device, and by the way, this holds true with any other transaction you're doing, including shipping sales orders, the information is on the device locally. So if I walk somewhere where my network connection is non-existent or it's spotty or it just goes down for a minute, whatever the case may be, I can complete my transactions with data validation and data lookups, even though I might be disconnected. Now, this next prompt here is for warehouse code. This is optional. This can be tied once again to the user, so I never am asked for what warehouse I'm working in because I'm always in the same one. Or we can go ahead and populate this based on what information was on the purchase order. So if the purchase order has warehouse 1, that's what it's going to take. You also could allow it so that the user can change this. Most people go with just the defaulting to what's on the PO, and we can even bypass that if you don't want the users asked for it. Now, my demo instance has bins supported. So if you're going into that level of detail where you're not just tracking obviously what warehouse items are in, but you're also tracking those detailed bin locations, the mobile app's going to know that. It's going to go ahead and ask you for that. This, as an example when receiving, could automatically default to a virtual bin, let's say, called receiving. And the idea behind that is I might not know as I'm recording this receipt where these items go on my shelves, but I need to record my receipt. So I'm just going to put them in a generic virtual bin called receiving, and then I'll do a transfer, or we could even call it a put away on the scanner to then move those items to their proper locations on the shelves. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab one of my bins that's set up here. And now we're into the actual indication of items. You'll see here the items that are on this PO along with quantities list out for me here. Now, if the items are already barcoded, great. Scan those and you can keep on moving on here. The solution does support what we refer to as an alias barcode. Back in Intacct, it's referred to as a cross-reference field. Back in item, when you set up your items, it's where you can put, for example, a vendor's item number. Let's say your manufacturer you're buying from, your vendor, they barcode their items, but it doesn't line up with your item number. Well, whatever's in their barcode, place in those fields, then you can scan that one. You don't have to worry about printing barcode labels. We also allow you to select from this list here. So if the items are not barcoded, and let me go ahead and do this really quickly as well. I'm just going to key something random in here. If I were to scan or key something in that's not on this PO, it's going to tell me, hey, this is an unknown item. Now, this can be locked down where it just simply tells me, hey, this item isn't on the PO. Or you can have this set up like my demo is here, where it's going to ask me to go ahead and save it as an alias. This is commonly used when people start using these types of solutions because if their vendors barcode their items then, well, you may not want to sit there at a PC and key all those in. As you receive them in, it'll alert you, hey, that's not your item number. You can then say yes, and it'll create the alias for you right there on the device. We also allow you to select from this menu here, which can be locked down also. You can force people to scan, and they simply just see this as a display option here. So I'm going to go ahead and select on this, hit accept. It automatically goes over to my quantity field. I see my quantity summary here. If I'm using a device that does not have a physical keypad, as I mentioned, I'm on a PC, it knows I have a keypad to key the quantity in. And there are some scanners out there with physical keypads. If you're using a device, though, that's just a full touchscreen, a numeric keypad would automatically pop up in this bottom area where I'm moving my mouse around, so you can tap on the screen with the quantity there. Now I'm going to key in 1 twice. Let's say I have the proverbial fat fingers, hit 1 twice. Well, we validate that for you. So we go ahead and tell the user, hey, you can't exceed the quantity of 1. Now this is also another setup option. If you do allow over receiving, it'll simply warn the user and then they can continue to receive it. But it's just checking to make sure, hey, does the quantity match up with what my Intacct system said I had? We also, if you have items set for labeling then, you could trigger the label by tapping on this little icon where my mouse is, or it can be set to then have a dialog box pop up and ask the user to print the labels then. Again, it would print out to a network thermal printer. You can design the labels to look however you want, whatever size you want, whatever information you want on there. As an example, if you're tracking items by lot number, serial number, expiration date, or all three, you can put all that information even into one barcode then so you can scan that. So you can design them to look however you want. Now, as you receive items in, they drop off. Let's grab this next item here, and let's do the quantity on the opposite side of things. Instead of trying to receive in too many here, I'm just going to go ahead and key in a 1, which is very possible to happen. I received in 10, I just hit a 1. Now, if I'm paying attention, I'm going to look and say, oh, wait a second, this item is still displayed here. I must have screwed up. Oh, yes, let me pull it back up and completely receive it in. However, we have found that when people get used to using the solution, it's very possible they would say, oh, received in 10, key in the 1 accidentally, and then this arrow appears which signifies, hey, I'm done, move on, and it gets you to an overview screen. Now, any line that's not completely received in, or on the shipping side of things, not completely picked or shipped, it's categorized as unresolved. So that could be the instance I'm showing you here, or maybe it's just a large list of items and I just skipped an item altogether. It's going to be categorized as unresolved. Once again, if somebody's paying attention here, they're going to see, wait a minute, why do I have this unresolved line here? As I mentioned before, though, people get used to using this. They blow right through it. They hit that arrow button and then boom, hit send data. So we give you an actionable dialog box here. You have to acknowledge the fact that you have these unresolved lines. So if you didn't get that item from your vendor, as an example, you can go ahead and hit send, and it'll go ahead and back order that. However you have back ordering set up intact, that's what kicks in, and that's how it'll record that for you. Or in the event that I'm describing here, I accidentally did that. So I'm going to look at this and say, wait a second, let me hit review. Oh, here's the line in question. I will now grab this item and correct it so I can see my quantities were off and move on and send this back over to my Intacct system now. Now, it's completely received in PO, so it's not going to prompt me any longer for the unresolved lines. And what it did, just to kind of review there, is it made sure we were dealing with the correct items and the correct quantities, not allowing me to over-receive, not allowing me to under-receive. Well, it warned me on that at least. And then even printing off labels. And then once it's back in Intacct, if I go ahead and do a refresh here, here's where the automation side comes in now. It automatically converts that purchase order, and furthermore, automatically creates the PO receiver. And that's how my workflow is set. So here's the PO receiver. And it reflects the items and quantities that were received in. All right, so we do just have a half an hour set for this here today. So I want to flip back over to the mobile device here and hit a couple of highlights, just to mention some of the other transactions. I've talked about it on outbound. You can do a staging solution or a staging workflow and then do a pack and ship, or you can do it in one step. I'm going to jump over to my back into my Intacct here and go into my order entry and explain that a little bit further. So the way that works and the way we have this set up for a lot of customers is by controlling the workflow. So in the example I gave you guys, it would set up to look to the sales order for inventory as what we call the source document. So when I'm doing that picking or staging transaction, this is the only set of orders this is looking for. Once it does that, performs that transaction, the staging or picking, it'll move that to the destination document of, in this case, picking for inventory. And again, you can get more creative, call it whatever you want. We're not the best at creativity on this side of things, so we just called it picking inventory. Now, when I go to check and pack, the source document for that transaction, because it's already been staged, is just picking for inventory. So it allows that control factor of, I don't want my guys seeing an order that's not been staged yet to go ahead and ship out. But also, I have myself covered because in the event that it is a special order that came in, I can do it in one step here with sales order shipping. The source doc for that would be sales order, destination is shipper. So that's just an example of how you can get creative with the workflows on this side of things. Under manufacturing is that advanced kit that I mentioned in the PowerPoint portion of what we've talked about here. You can have this just for the finished goods or, as I mentioned, for components. Inventory transactions is where we got a little creative in the sense of how we set this up. I referenced this, but I'll mention it again here. A transfer, whether it's for warehouses or bins, is really the same transaction. But from a warehouse perspective and a shop floor perspective, it may be best to go ahead and specify, hey, you're going to do bins on this transfer here, or just a warehouse. So you can call it whatever you want on the mobile device. An even better example is how I have set here, inventory issues, damaged items, and scrap items. These all three are adjustments out for inventory. It's going to lower my inventory for whatever items I deal with within these operations or transactions. However, these could be three separate types of adjustments back in my Intacct system that affect GL in different ways. Lastly, there is the inventory receipt here. That's just bringing items straight into inventory. It's an adjustment up. In the construction environment, you would also have what I typically nest them under what I would call a jobs title here, job transactions, and that's where you can do like your issues or your returns. Those are just separate operations, again, on the scanner. The last one here that I'll touch on is the inventory counts. So they're basically the same thing, but I have them listed here as either a cycle count or physical inventory. And the way this is handled and maintained, there is an inventory count within Intacct that this will seamlessly work with as well in the next release, I believe that is. But we handle a lot of this here over in what we refer to as our management portal. And this is the last portion I want to show you guys here today. Under physical count, you go in and you would actually create what we call an event. So you can create an event, or really what it's doing is just creating a count. And you can do it by warehouse. So I would select which warehouse I wanted to do it in, what type of count I want to do. Do I want to do it by warehouse, by specific product line, or selected items? So I can get fancy with how I want to do my counts, and I can indicate my product line. Now, I'm not going to save that because I have one that's an old one in here. I'm going to pull this up so you can see what happens when you do create that. When you have an event in your system, what it does is it does a system snapshot. So here are the items that were a part of that event that I created previously. Here's what Intacct thinks I have. There's a difference because I haven't counted anything yet. Once you count from the mobile devices, it populates this column here of my counted quantity, and then you can go ahead and do your adjustments. It'll highlight anything that's off. Once you're satisfied with it, you do a reconciliation, and then it'll close out the count. Ultimately, what happens is back in Intacct, it creates inventory adjustments. So if I go into inventory here, and I go into adjustments and scroll to the bottom, you would see ScanForce physical adjustment decrease or increase. Once again, you can control how this hits GL, and it does the adjustment for you. Again, adding items that maybe you have and didn't realize you have, or removing items that you didn't have and thought you did. Last thing, here's that activity. I'm gonna go into transaction history. We only have a couple from today, so there's only a few that'll show up here. This just gives you an example. You can hide columns if you want to. There's a column chooser that is over here now. Let me go ahead and pull this over. Try to make this a little bigger. This is where you can select what columns you want to have in this grid. So what data do you want to go ahead and report off of or view? You can save searches. And by the way, you can go in here and search by simply, let's say I want to look for a particular item. You can go ahead and say contains, and then 1002 is an example, and it filters that down for you. And then you can also do things like, I want to look at this particular item, and I want to see all of my shipping transactions for it. So if I had a ton of transactions in here, which realistically you will, you'd be able to narrow that down even further. Save that if you wanted to, your searches, and then you have the option to export this. So whatever you do in terms of the filtering, looking for data, then I can export it to any one of these file formats. And I guess I said last thing, but one last thing I will show you here is under this admin tab. It's where you can configure labels. This is kind of the brains of the solution here. It does have its own secure logins, not just anybody can get in here. And this is just where you can control things like that mobile menu that I showed you guys. And this will reflect how I have mine. Inbound, nested under that, we have receiving and direct receipts. So I can control what I see here on the mobile device. All right, Stuart, I know we're running close to time here. Everybody, did want to comment really quickly. If this is of interest to you guys, you can reach out to myself and Stuart, and we can set up an actual deep dive into how you're doing things, what you're looking to do, and we can actually show you more detailed transactions here of the solution. But just wanted you guys to see the capabilities, how easy the screens are to navigate, and how clean that looks.
Awesome, great job. So let me show my screen real quick here, screen number 3. Joys of switching back to the mode here, but great job, Steve. Really appreciate what you've done and what you and your company have put together. I saw it when it first came out several years ago, and it's just amazing how far it's come along. So great job there. So with that, I don't see any. There was a few questions along the way. I answered them in the chat, but if there's any other questions, feel free to ask them at this point here. Otherwise, again. Just, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. We can get those scheduled. Feel free to sign up for our upcoming webinars. And then also don't forget that Sage is having their 2022 R3 release coming out next month. So that will be pushed down to all clients. We'll be doing a webinar on that as well, and we'll be sending out some details and all the new features. So, Steve, I don't think we see any other last questions. So we promised 30 minutes and we got it done in 29. So they have 1 minute extra of their day. So
perfect. And thanks for inviting me to be part of this, Stuart. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.